Good evening. I'm Damon McLeod, pastor of Impact Life Church in Kokomo, Indiana. And the lesson today for Facebook world or our digital world that we're now in is really just the word of the Lord that speaks to us about what do you do when you're in it being in the middle of it, in the thick of things, stuck in the mud. We would say in church, going through. Sometimes you hear other euphemisms such as, I'm just having a hard time right now. And it's really just a word of encouragement for those who are unfortunately off of work or without, in need, maybe sick, maybe directly impacted by this terrible virus that is spreading across the world, this pandemic that we all are watching and waiting. And so tonight I'll ask you, for those who are joining in, to simply join me in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 14, beginning at verse number 12. And in this point of scripture that we hear God saying that God has stretched out his hand against the land. We're certainly seeing that by this terrible, terrible thing that we find ourselves in the middle of. I'll read just a portion of the scripture here, beginning at verse number 14. Again, I'm in Ezekiel chapter 14, verse number 14, and it reads, "Though these three men, Noah, Daniel, Job, were in it, they should deliver but their own souls by their righteousness, said the Lord." That's verse 14. We see it repeated again in verse 16. Though these three men were in it, though they were deep in it. They were deep in it. They all have their own in it experience and the things that they were dealing with. We know that Noah was dealing with the wrath of God. God said it repented him that he made man. Daniel is dealing with it in the middle of a hostile situation where he had to stand up and be chosen and be an example of the living God. He very much was in it. And then lastly, Job. We know the trials of Job, how he lost his family, lost all of his children, lost his livestock, lost his health. He certainly was in it. Boy. Verse number 18, we see it repeated again. "Though these three men were in it, as I live, said the Lord, they should neither deliver sons nor daughters." They just had to worry about delivering themselves. And finally, we see it one more time in this chapter, in chapter number 20. Again, it reads, "Though Noah, Daniel, and Job were in it, said the Lord, they should deliver neither son nor daughter, but they should deliver their own souls by their righteousness." And that's the thought for tonight. What do I do when I'm in it? What do I do when chaos is all around me? What do I do when it seems like I'm the only one trying to be about the right? I'm the only one standing up for righteousness. I'm the only one looking to remain faithful. I'm the only one. We see in all three of these cases, in the case of Noah, in the case of Daniel, in the case of Job, that they all experienced what it was like to be isolated, or to be by themselves, or to be one of the few, or to be isolated. And one of the things that we know about God is that when God has taken us through something, or when we are in it, I would say whether you're knee deep, whether you're waist deep, or whether you're neck deep, that all of us have an in it experience. And in those times that it may feel like we're alone, it may feel like we're of the few, it may feel like we're outnumbered, it may feel like our hope is gone, as all three of these examples show us. But each of these examples, each of these men give us great insight on how we should conduct ourselves when we're in it. One of the reasons why Noah is mentioned here in verse 14, verse 16, verse 18, and again in verse 20, is that Noah received instruction before the in it process began, before calamity began, before the flood came, that Noah was tipped off and given very specific instructions on what to do, how to survive. And that's important to know, that while we're in this time of testing, we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. We don't know what's coming over the horizon. But now is the time for those of us who have been given instruction on how to survive, to take heed. I'm not just talking about naturally, but how do we get through this without our faith being broken, without our hope being dissolved, without our spirit man being weakened? Well, there's certain instructions that we have to abide by even while we're in it. But Noah is our example of what do you do beforehand? What do you do before trouble hits? As many of us can attest, that we've all waited in lines at the grocery stores, and by now we've all seen empty shelves. By now we've all seen desperation on others' faces when they feel like that resources may be slim. But now's not the time to panic. Now's not the time to lose hope. But now's the time to look to the hills from whence cometh our help, that our help cometh from the Lord. Now is the time to pray more. Now is the time to seek God's face for instruction on what to do, like Noah, on how to be prepared when the rain comes. How do I survive this episode? We get a glimpse of what do you do when you're face to face with trouble, when you're face to face with calamity, when you're face to face with one of the sore judgments. We see later on in this chapter that the Lord speaks of his sore judgments in chapter 14. He speaks of judgment by the sword. He speaks of judgment by the noisome beast. He speaks of judgment by famine. And finally, he speaks of judgment by pestilence. And certainly that's what we're seeing in the world today. Pestilence is widespread sickness or disease, widespread, out of our control. It's pestilence running wild. And so Daniel is our example on how you conduct yourself when you were face to face. He's not in a preparation mode like Noah was, but he is now nose to nose with calamity, nose to nose with danger. He's in the lion's den. He's not prepping for it. He doesn't hear reports of others in lion's dens, but he finds himself nose to nose in the lion's den. And what is his response? Well, we see that God is with him, and he's confident of that. And so there's no panic. There's a peace when you know God's with you in it. There's a peace when you accept that if God be for me, then the whole world can be against me, but I still have, the odds are still in my favor when God is with me. Daniel's our example of being in it presently. Finally, we find Job. Job is our example. Much of the book of Job is detailing what happens after tragedy hits him, what happens after he's tested, what happens on the other side of tragedy. And so Job is our example of not losing faith no matter what you've been through, no matter how hard the day gets, no matter how difficult of a time you may have had, no matter how unfair it may seem or it may be. I won't even say it may seem, how unfair life can be sometimes. And so Job is our example that no matter what happens, that God is still with him, and he's still able to be like Noah and to be like Daniel, that he's counted righteous, he's counted to be faithful, he's humble, and even when he's alone and outnumbered and feels like all of his friends are coming against him and his wife has encouraged him to lose his faith, but he's our example of what do we do on the other side of it. Unfortunately, just the simple numbers tell us that some of us are going to experience some heartache. Some of us may lose loved ones here in the next few months. Some of us may either directly or indirectly be affected or suffer loss. I can tell you, I've already experienced loss because of this violence. Some of you all may say, what's going on with my 401k, or what's going on with the value of my home, or flat out lost my job and I've been sent home with no guarantee for income for the foreseeable future. But I'm here to just encourage you tonight that though these three men were in it, that the mission didn't change, and God's plan for them didn't change, but God's plan for them was heightened because of what they had to go through. God's mission for them was heightened, and it became more important. They were defined by what was going on around them. Some of us are going to be stretched. We're going to be tasked. We're going to be given responsibilities that we may not feel like we're ready for. We're going to be put in a position where people are depending and counting on us, and it may be beyond our own ability to handle. And that's a good thing, because if it's beyond our ability, that means that we need God like never before. That's the best place we can be in, where things are forcing us to rely on God and to call on God and to trust in God. And so whatever is going on in this world, whatever comes, whatever we're facing today, whatever we're preparing to face, the word of the Lord just tells us that though we may be in it, that there's some saving of souls to be done, and it's to begin with ourselves. One thing about God is, I tell my children all the time, that God is not a grandfather, meaning that you don't have a relationship with God based on your parents' relationship or based on someone else's relationship, that you've got to find God for yourself. This is a very good time. Many of us are spending time in our homes with our loved ones. Many of us are spending that quality time with our family, playing board games and sharing meals because the restaurants are closed. Folks are cooking who haven't cooked in a long time. Families are sitting around the dinner table using chairs that haven't been used for a long time. And that's a good thing. That's a blessing. But during this time, we should be evaluating our soul situations. And we should be saying, how do I stand in God's eyes? And am I pleasing? Am I pleasing? Am I being obedient? Am I being faithful? Am I being committed? Am I willing to be a light in the dark world? Am I willing to be an example for God? These three men, though they were righteous, though they were faithful, though they were obedient, the land didn't get saved because of them. Noah's righteousness didn't stop the flood, but they had to focus on saving themselves. And that's the prayer tonight, that wherever you find yourself, that you'll take some time to focus on saving yourself. It's a chilling reminder every time I get on an airplane and I'm watching the stewardesses do their demonstration on how to respond or react if there should be an emergency situation. And it's such a stark reminder that they tell us, and that is, before you worry about the person sitting next to you, before you worry about if they can breathe, make sure you take the time to secure your mask before you try to help somebody else. And that just symbolizes the message tonight, that though we be in it, you gotta focus on your own soul right now. You gotta focus on your own thing. You can't help anybody else if you're not strong, if you're not filled, if you're not prayed up, if you haven't spent time with God, and you don't have anything to encourage anybody else with, pour into someone else. Let God fill you up with love, His joy, His peace, His compassion, His Spirit, so that you can be a light in this dark land. Though we be in it, God is in it with us. He's in it for us. The thing we love about God is He doesn't mind getting down in the muck and the mire with us. So God bless you all. Pastor Damon, Impact Life Church. God bless you.